Hey everyone, welcome to another session of Conversations with Courageous Cancer Warriors. And today I have to tell you, I have stalked this group of amazing ladies, and I am thrilled to be able to share this with you. So today, on today's show, we're welcoming Rachel Belotti, who is a child cancer warrior, and also Jenell Reisner, and they are co-creators of this amazing movement called True North Collective. And I'm going to let them share with you like how it got started. First, thank you so much, Rachel and Jenell, for being here. This is truly an honor.
Thanks for having us. This is so cool.
We're really excited.
I absolutely love what you're up to in the world. And I want to talk briefly about Rachel's childhood cancer. So our audience here is cancer warriors, caregivers, and healthcare providers. So I wanted to kind of get a little bit into, what your experience was with, your cancer warrior journey.
Yeah, it's been a twisty road. I'll try to condense it. But when I was 14, I was a freshman in high school, and my biology teacher had diseases in a basket, like written down on pieces of paper. And she was walking through, and you were supposed to pick out a disease, and that's what you were going to write your term paper on. And so I reached my hand in, picked it out. I picked Hodgkin's lymphoma, wrote my paper on it. It was a pretty boring paper, to be honest. I was like, man, why didn't I get some cool disease? Like, I don't know. And when we went to turn the paper in, people were talking about their symptoms, and mine, I was like, yeah, mine was so stupid. Like, the worst thing is like, you have trouble breathing. And I put my hand on my chest when I did that, and I felt something that I knew right away it didn't feel right, right above my left collarbone. And I was like, what is that? And so I went home. My dad's a biomedical engineer, and I was like, Dad, what is this? And we went to the doctor, the pediatrician. He was like, cancer is like 1 in however many thousand. It's just a common cold. And I hadn't been sick for like several years. Long story short, it ended up being Hodgkin's lymphoma is what I had. And so
That's insane.
I know, totally crazy. So I went to Children's Hospital in Chicago. They actually gave me a choice. Since I was 14, I could go to the adult facility or the Children's Hospital. And truly, the adult facility was so depressing that I was like, no, I'm going to the children's facility. Yeah. But now I'm actually learning now. I'm 37. I just joined my first cancer support group of young adult cancer patients and survivors in Dallas, all digital. But I'm learning that I think I technically am a young adult cancer survivor, but at the time that wasn't like a thing. And so I was kind of in this like lost area, which that whole time and the time after was like, I was just trying to survive it and move on with my life. And the unpacking of that and what the story was and what it means to me then, now, in the future, is honestly an ongoing experience and journey.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot here. The point that you bring up that's really valid is the fact that, a while ago, the thought of being a cancer survivor and being able to get all of the support that goes along with having, a diagnosis wasn't readily available for people. You were kind of like on your own. So I'm really proud to see that we are evolving in that way and that we're providing the resources that people need. And I love the fact that even after all of these years, you're still involved in the community and, supporting yourself and supporting others. That's really amazing.
Yeah, thank you. It is the support shifts and changes. Mm-hmm. So actually, right when I first met Jenell in Milwaukee, I was the first employee of a childhood cancer nonprofit because I was like, I had been in advertising and corporate brand strategy. I was like burning out. I knew I didn't want to be on that path anymore. And I found this childhood cancer nonprofit and was like, maybe this is like the way I can give back. I was finally able to talk about it and I was starting to process things. Mm-hmm. And I realized pretty quickly that I was becoming almost a martyr to the cause a little bit. And for my own self-care, I kind of had to separate myself and be like, okay, the way I support this is actually going to be different than being a part of a nonprofit that is like expecting a lot from me. And that was an interesting journey. I had a really cool, the executive director there just was able to give me the space to have some really honest conversations with her about the difference between, you know, how people interpret the cancer experience, and that a lot of parents do become martyrs for the cause. And that might not be like language that lands well for people, but that's just kind of how I've said it. And a lot of times the kids are like, no, I'm just going to live life fully. And that's not, again, not necessarily to say that it's that black and white, but for me, I definitely realized that how I can give back is through things like the True North Collective, which we'll talk about. You know, how I got through it was refining my own voice. And so how can I support others in finding their voice? How can I actually now grow my hair out, shave it off, grow my hair out, shave it off, grow my hair out, shave it off. And I'll keep doing that as long as they'll take my hair. And so there's other ways that I get involved and support that feel true to me.
Oh, I absolutely love that. And the other point that you bring up that's so very important is the fact that the emotional component never goes away unless you really do the work to face it head on. And most of us are not willing to do that, right? Like it's such a trying time. Going through treatments is just super, you know, you have a set schedule, you know what you need to go through, you just kind of go through the motions. And then it's like a few years later, I know I'm 3 years out from breast cancer. At year 2, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Everything that I was just kind of like not realizing I needed to deal with. So I really commend you and, you know, this movement with your True North collective and really having people share their experiences, be their own voice, and like to have that supportive environment is really amazing. Now, talk to me about how True North Collective started.
Yeah. And Jenell, I want you to jump in too, but like I had said, for me, I was kind of on this like traditional trajectory of advertising, corporate brand strategy. I was living in Vancouver and just leading this creative team. And I actually joined the Ride to Conquer Cancer up there. And you ride for 2 days from Vancouver to Seattle. There was gale force winds. It was wild. And on the bike, if you're a cancer survivor, you put like a yellow flag on the back. And I didn't want to put a flag on the back of my bike because that was kind of the start of me really like owning this story. Because before that point, the way that I told the story was truly for other people. It was like this courageous story that made everybody else feel comfortable, and it was exhausting. And I didn't want to have the flag. And my friends like forced me to put the flag on, which was actually really cool. Cause then you're on the whole time on the ride, people are like, yeah, Rachel, you're awesome.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Anyway, so I'm on there and you got a lot of time to think. And I was just like, what are you doing? And so a long story short, I ended up packing up what I could fit in my car and moving to go be with my boyfriend, who we'd been long distance for 7 months. So I ended up in Milwaukee. Jenell was in Milwaukee. I was like, didn't know what I was going to do with my life because I decided to just change everything and like be like, what am I doing? And there was a spin studio there, and I had been into biking. And so I was like, well, I'm going to see what this place is all about. And Jenell was running that spin studio. And that's how our paths crossed. Is I loved it there. And I was like, how can I get involved? And then she ended up, I had literally the most grueling interview I've ever had in my entire life. And she hired me. I was like interviewing for like a front desk job. I was like, what's happening? But then she ended up hiring me as the studio manager. So
I love it. Well, I'm happy that you passed the interview and that your paths crossed, because it's really a benefit to all of us now. And Jenell, I absolutely love that story. I think it's absolutely amazing. So talk to me a little bit about what True North Collective is.
Yeah, so Rachel, set us up perfectly, because from there, we were doing a lot of work at the studio, and we were building out programs and bringing groups of people together. And we would do things like Whole30 or different nutrition programs. And then we started to do intention setting programs. And if you've ever heard of the book Desire Mapping. So there were kind of all these things that we started to do. And it's funny because I actually just saw on social media, it was 4 years ago today, we were prepping, I know, which is like stars align. We were prepping for a Grow Gold event that we did to support the cancer community, and we partnered with Kit and Ace, which is a local clothing store, and we hauled all of our bikes into this retail store, and it was this really cool event. And as we were prepping for that, I don't think a lot of people know this, if you ever work at a fitness studio or a cycling studio specifically, there's a ton of behind the scenes work, including sitting there and cleaning bikes. I mean, basically like you clean an outdoor bike, and we had buckets, and Rachel and I were sitting there, and we'd been having all these conversations, and we had realized our experiences were similar, but they were different. And we wanted to do something with those conversations because we had been meeting friends and coworkers at coffee shops. And we're like, there's something here. Like, we're learning so much about ourselves through each other's experiences. And as we were preparing for that event, I just kind of looked over to Rachel and I was like, do you want to start a blog maybe? Or just I didn't know what it was, but I was like, there's just something here that's worth exploring. And so that sort of launched it. So Rachel was like, sure. We were both kind of on this journey. And we did start out with a blog, but it wasn't quite landing, which if anyone on here is also in that entrepreneurial mindset or running a business, you pivot all the time. And then we started to have conversations on, well, okay, the blog's not really landing. We're having these conversations with people at coffee shops. Like, what do we do with that? And it was like, well, duh, a podcast. And so that started the podcast journey. And it's, we've both kind of been living our lives and doing our own careers and jobs outside of that, but it's slowly started to grow. And I mean, really in 2020, it's been the biggest year for us as we've really doubled down and committed. And we're like, okay, this is something that is really worth, and we always knew it, but really worth putting additional effort into it and giving it a fair shot. And so now we're here.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And so talk to us about how the name came to be.
It's funny.
Please jump in on this one too.
So with the brand background, I was like, okay, we got to have something so interesting. And so I came up with a whole bunch of names. And I think the name I actually really wanted was it was noon on Thursday. And Jenell was like, that is stupid. That means nothing. And I was like, that's why I want it. That way people don't really know what it is that they're like. And she was like, no. I'm like, no. And so I think I fought hard for noon on Thursday for a while. And then, truly though, the True North Collective, just from we both we're outdoorsy. We like nature. It seemed inviting, but not you had to have your answer, and it was an ongoing journey. There was exploration to it. And so True North, I think, landed pretty quickly. And then we were trying to come up with what is it? True North what? And Collective just, again, felt work in progress, felt like you're part of a living entity that is growing and evolving and expanding and making mistakes and figuring it out. And so I think pretty quickly, once we got the True North Collective, we were both like, okay, yeah, done, let's go. And that's something that I'm really proud of, our energy. We do bring two different things to the table that really kind of weave together nicely. But one thing that we are both aligned on is for whatever reason, because I overthink everything and everywhere else in my life, when it comes to this, I'm just like, go, let's do it. Fuck it, let's do it. So that's kind of our mentality, is we just are like, yeah, that's good. If we need to change it, we can. Let's try it. So
And
I was gonna say, I think with the collective too, and Rachel, you started to highlight this, but something for me personally, it's just I don't really know what I'm doing, right? None of us really do. And we wanted the brand to be focused around that. We're not the experts here. We are also, as Rachel mentioned, on the journey with the people that are coming on our podcast. And we didn't want people to be experts that were coming on either. It's just like, please, like, share your experience.
Yeah.
And if you're in the middle of it and you don't have that figured out, even better, because that's not what a lot of times people highlight in podcasts. It's a lot of times like, hey, I made it to the end. Here's what I did, which is awesome and should be celebrated. And what about when you're in the middle and you can't see the dots that are in front of you and you're just like, what do I do here? And so we wanted to really be a part of that conversation.
And that's life, right? Whether it's you're dealing with a chronic illness or just everyday life going to work, you know, there's always times in life where you pivot, and there's always times in life where you just have no idea what you're doing and you're faking it till you make it, right? Like, and that's what I love most about it, is that you have really raw conversations. So how, like, talk to me, like, what's your vision with this? Like, where are you guys going with this?
So funny. We literally just talked about this yesterday.
We're all in the same wavelength.
Exactly.
Yeah. And like Jenell said earlier, this has been the year where we've really said, because again, I will own that when this whole thing started, while I have said, yeah, screw it, let's just do it. There's also a part of me that wants to make sure that I am not just taking on another project that doesn't go anywhere, or that takes up so much of my time that I can't live. And it's a balance. And so I remember when this whole thing started, I was like, okay, I'll commit to a season. And then the next year, and it was just like, whatever we can do, whenever we can do it. And I was like, okay. And then the next year I was like, okay, well, let's do at least this number. We'll do a season 2. And then this year I was like, you know, we get on this, we talk to these people, and it is honestly the coolest part of my life. It is giving me life. And I was like, I have to do this, or like, we have to do this more. And so, you know, doing it weekly, we're like, let's see what that feels like. And it's been amazing. Like, it's been so cool. And so now we're starting to say, okay, what does it actually look like to create a business plan, to look at revenue streams, to create an LLC, to really, like, you know, get the different handles. What do we need to own this name more fervently? Like, what does it look like if we're not just having conversations that are recorded with, you know, the people in this space, but what if we're able to create opportunities for these conversations to happen out in the world, in real time, in the wild, beyond just us? Like, how do we facilitate that? Or how do we invite it? And so that's kind of where we're going, is the essence of the conversation. How does that become accessible to anyone, anywhere?
That's amazing. That's amazing. And so what has surprised you the most?
I think my biggest aha, and we've talked about this in the podcast, is early on in the seasons, because I had no expectations, right? I had never podcasted before. We would just like our slogan is everyday people fearlessly finding and living their true north. So we were finding everyday people in our lives. And twofold. One, that we'd bring on people that we would like know in our real lives, and I would learn so much about them, and we would have these conversations with depth that I wasn't getting in my normal life. So just like that in itself, just being like, I had no idea. Like, I've known you for years and I had no idea this side of you was there. So for me, there was an aha of like, I want to have more of those conversations, not just on the podcast, but how can I take how we are facilitating conversations in the podcast and have those conversations in real life? Because I was kind of, there's a time and a place for it, but there gets to a point where it's like, I'm kind of sick of just having surface level conversations. Like, these aren't fueling connections. And like, once I had experienced that on the podcast, it was like, that's what I want in my real life. Like, I want that in the podcast too, but also, so that really changed. And then also just realizing we were hearing all these people's stories and experiences, and they were experiences that I've never had, Rachel might not have had either, but there's like an understanding of the emotion, and we use the term essence a lot from Rachel's life coaching background, and an essence of like, I've never had that experience, but I know what it feels like to feel that way. And that was really cool. And of course, my phone, I'm doing the Siri when she listens all the time now. I didn't understand how you felt. But yeah, so that was really surprising, just like how much more connected we are than I think a lot of us believe.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, because as for somebody, the kind of person that I am is I love to have those deep conversations. It's, what I try to do, and my friends kind of, those that do not want to do that for whatever reason, whether they just don't want to be confronted with what we're talking about, or like, it's really easy to stay surface level. It takes some courage to go deep and to admit some things that you might be feeling or things that are happening in life. I can definitely relate, because I've been told more than once of like, can't we just have like, do we have to always go down this road? Like, do we have to have these conversations?
Are you reading my diary? That's literally
like,
totally.
Yeah. And it's like, I can't help myself, because I want to get to know you. I want to know like why you tick. And it's very hard for people sometimes to open up. So the fact that you're able to have this with people in your lives, and now you're expanding it, is absolutely amazing. And Rachel, what about yourself? What surprised you?
Yeah, I would have said probably there was like a moment, I think it was season 1, where we were having a conversation with somebody. It was either, so it was twofold. One, I was having a conversation with another cancer survivor who was also 14 when they had a blood cancer. And I expected our stories to be so similar, and they weren't. They were polar opposites. And so here I thought, because this person went through something so similar as me, that we were just gonna, it was just gonna click. And not that we didn't click, but the stories were so vastly different. And I was like, oh. But then we had another podcast with a friend of mine who was transitioning, and the story with her, I was like, oh my gosh, I completely can relate, even though I've never transitioned. The essence of that story completely relates to this totally other form that in my life. And so just like Jenell said, it's like, it's been so crazy, the humanity that actually exists, and like what we can learn through all of that. But the other thing that's been surprising is just how well I guess how well we're able to just create a space for people to go there. So I am like you, where a lot of people are always like, man, do you always have to like ask me the question? Like, really? And I'm like, come on. But in this space, I don't know what it is. It's just this really cool like vibe where I always joked that I want someone to be able to joke about like poop and fart jokes and death, and then talk about death in the exact same sentence. And I feel like we've done just a really innate job at holding that space. And so there's a levity, but there's a depth in it. And so that was surprising to me. I really didn't know how how we were going to vibe off each other, Jenell and I. Like, I knew how we worked together at the studio, but to hold these types of conversations, because we do have very different experiences. And when I met Jenell, she wasn't necessarily the most, and I know you'll fully admit this, Jenell, but she wasn't necessarily the most like openly emotional person. Like, she was very closed off, very business. And then our age differences, like there was just a lot that I wasn't sure how it was going to go. And it's just kind of like worked. And so trying not to overthink that and allowing it to be has been a really cool surprise.
Well, opposites attract, right? It's one of those things. And I can relate, because my boyfriend is very stoic. He does not show emotion, and I like wear my emotions on my sleeve. Like, I cry at commercials, right? So it's sometimes a blessing and a curse, but at the same time, I find that the different approaches allow you to have an even deeper conversation, right? And to open up and to be human, is really something that takes some effort, right? Like, you're either a talker or you're not, right? So how do you create a safe space for your for your audience? I mean, for your guests?
Yeah. I would say a huge part of it is that we also share our own journey. So Rachel mentioned, I mean, when she met me, I was at a very, I was in my younger 20s. Like, I didn't know who I was. I was running successful fitness studio, but never, I had been taught, like so many people in the business world, to just, like put on the business face and run the business. And so I think sharing our own journey, because that was never really who I was. It's like who I thought I was supposed to be to run that business. And being vulnerable. And, we say a lot on the podcast that I'm like, well, that lives on the internet forever now. So I think that's a huge part of it. I think and Rachel, I want to hear your perspective on this too, but I do think, I'll speak from my own evolution. Like, I think I'm pretty good at not judging people anymore, because I used to judge myself so hard. And so as we've gone through this evolution, like having those conversations and just like realizing that there is no right or wrong. And that's something Rachel really taught me. Her background, she's a life coach, and we always joke like I was basically her first, client without really even knowing it. And just, I think once you start to realize like there's no right or wrong way to live life, that creates this space too, where we can just celebrate where people are at. And I mean, it's completely changed me too, and how I look at my own life and how I can be more accepting of who I am and where I'm at. So Rachel, I'm sure you have additional thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things is that there isn't really a formula. We are fellow travelers with people, and like there's a difference, and that's what we'll hear a lot of times. Like after our guests are on, they'll say like, "Gosh, that was so fun. I didn't think it was gonna be so fun. Like it really was just a conversation with you guys about life." And we're like, "Yeah," and it seems like. And I can, for myself too, thinking about it, before I was in this world, thinking about being a guest on something, I think would have felt really nerve-wracking, and that I needed to have, poignant answer or like a succinct package of like, here's what it all means, and like, blah, 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 sprinkles. And it's just, even if that is real, that's my realness. That's not somebody else's. And so, I think I innately, even from when I was like in the I was always part of the interview process at every company I was at, because literally people share shit with me that I'm like, you probably shouldn't be sharing this with me. I don't even know what question I asked that got you to share this with me, but let's just put that over here. And so I don't know what it is about me, but I have like a very open, comfortable space, and people tell me a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I get it. I get
it. And then I think with Jenell's, just like, Jenell has a really chill way of like a lightness about her. So like, I'm like, come into the depths, even though I don't realize I'm doing it. And then Jenell's like, come on, it's fun out here. Like, it's cool, whatever. And so it's like this really cool, like, mixture. And so I don't know if there's necessarily like a formula that we're following. I think we're each truly just being ourselves, and there is a lot to that modeling, and the influence of just being able to see somebody else in their skin with their foibles and their mess and the beauty, and then to have two different people doing it in a different way but still doing it is like a pretty powerful space to step into. I think it really invites people to just let go of whatever they've been carrying, and even for a hot second, just kind of be there with us.
Rachel, so. You do such a good job of celebrating people too. Like, that's something I've also learned, that modeling from you, of like, people come on and you have a very succinct way of listening to what they say and then being like, you did this right. Like, you're rocking it. And I think that immediately makes people feel comfortable. And I don't think you think about that you're doing it, but generally, like, that's one of the first things, like, they say their intro and then you're like, you beautifully did this. And they're like, I did beautifully do that. And just like, yeah, so I think that opens people up too, because a lot of times we don't celebrate each other probably as much as we should.
And, you nailed it when you said like, everyone feels that they have to be perfect, right? You can't go on this podcast until you know exactly what you're going to say and what you're exactly going to do. And you can't go you know, we've been programmed, I feel, as a society that like, you can't look bad. And it's like, the joke is that like, it's okay, like make fun of yourself, like make fun of your quirks, like just have it be okay that however you are is perfect, right?
Yeah.
And I that's the essence that I get from what you're sharing today, like come as you are. And that's why like I love Nashville, because Nashville used to be come as you are before the huge influx of people. You know, you were celebrated for being different. Um, and that's what I feel from you. So thank you so much for being that for people who just want to be accepted. Like we all want to be accepted, and just thank you for having that out in the universe and having that space available. So how can people find you?
Yeah, so we have our website, it's thetruenorthcollective.org, where we have all of our podcasts listed out and information on us. Our probably most active platform is Instagram, which is the True North Collective _, and we post when our new episodes come out, updates. And then we also do on the first Thursday of every month, it's called The Collective, and that's where we invite anyone who's interested to come in and have a conversation with us. It's live over Zoom, and we have different topics every month, but it's basically the conversations that we're looking to have, but with anybody. And then we also say too, if you ever have someone that wants to be in the podcast, you want to be in the podcast, we'll have conversations with basically anyone if you're willing to go there with us and share what you're wrestling with and how you authentically live your life. Did I miss anything, Rachel?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I think the only thing that I want to add is it's been an interesting thing to wrap my hands around or step into the conversation around authenticity. I think when we first started, it's always something that I've been drawn to, like what does it mean to be me? Maybe that was there before cancer, maybe cancer heightened it for me. But you know, especially when that becomes such a big part of my identity and I'm trying to wrestle with that, the idea of authenticity can kind of become so abstract or ambiguous, and like we know what we're saying, but what does it actually mean? And the cool thing about this space has really been, you know, before I think authenticity felt like I was trying to work towards some state of being that was my idealized state. And one of the biggest things I've learned from this experience is that authenticity isn't about some ideal state. It's about being able to be okay with exactly where I am. And not that it even has to be okay, even just acknowledging if it's not okay. And then figuring out who I want to be, what I want to do, what support structures I need. Am I outside of myself? What's happening in this moment that is me, in this body, in this world, in this environment? I don't know, it felt important to share that, because I don't know if I went into this thinking that that's what the conversation on authenticity was going to be, but I'm so excited that is actually where it's headed, because it's so like there's so many nuances to that, because it's about the moment that you're in. So yeah.
And you know, we celebrate that. We celebrate people just being their true self and living in the moment. And you know, especially after you've gone through a crisis, like there's no way that you can't be changed by it, right? So it's going to change you either for the better or for the worse, and you really get to choose how that goes. And you know, if I've learned anything during my journey, is that like life is short, and make it the best life you could possibly have. So I feel that you're doing that for your listeners and for the guests that you have, and it's really an honor to be able to have this conversation with you today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
This is great.
Yeah,
Really appreciate it.